20 things that have become obsolete since 2000. Remember when getting lost meant pulling into a gas station for directions, or when your mixtape lived in a shoebox full of cassettes? In just a few decades, everyday life has changed dramatically. In today's video, we're taking a nostalgic, and sometimes hilarious, look back at the things we've left behind in our rush toward the future. Computer labs. Not too long ago, if you wanted to use a computer at school, you had to make a special trip to the computer lab. These were dedicated rooms filled with rows of desktop computers, humming quietly and waiting to be used. High schools and colleges set aside these spaces specifically so students could type papers, do research, or learn basic computer skills. Back then, having your own laptop just wasn't common, and smartphones weren't even a thing yet. So, if you needed to get online or use software for a project, the computer lab was your only option. You couldn't just whip out a device in class or head to a coffee shop with Wi-Fi. Nope. You had to go to the lab, log in, and get your work done while you were there. Once you walked out the door, your digital access pretty much ended until your next visit. It might sound inconvenient now, but at the time, it was a big step forward from the days before computers were part of everyday life. Today, with laptops, tablets, and phones in almost every backpack and pocket, the idea of a computer lab feels like a distant memory from a slower, more structured digital age. TV static. There was a time when turning on your television didn't guarantee you'd see a picture right away. Instead, you might be greeted by a screen full of fuzzy black and white static, accompanied by a loud hissing sound that could make your teeth clench. It wasn't just annoying, it meant the signal was out, the antenna wasn't aligned, or the station had signed off for the night. That swirling snow was a familiar sight for generations who grew up before cable and streaming took over. Today, if your TV isn't working, it usually means your internet's down. And when that happens, you're not likely to see any static. Just a silent, empty black screen. It's oddly sterile compared to the noisy chaos of old TV static. In fact, many younger folks don't even own televisions anymore. Their shows, movies, and even live sports are all streamed straight to their phones, tablets, or laptops through platforms like Netflix, Hulu, or YouTube. That crackling static might seem outdated now, but it was once a strange comfort. A shared experience that told you the problem wasn't just yours. Now, it's just one more analog memory fading into the background of a digital world. Getting lost before GPS. Before the age of smartphones and built-in GPS, getting lost was just part of life. If you were driving somewhere new and took a wrong turn, there was no friendly voice telling you to recalculate. You were on your own. And honestly, that was kind of exciting. If you didn't know where you were, you had a few choices. Pull into a gas station and ask for directions, unfold a massive paper map from the glove box, or just keep driving and hope something looked familiar. There was a certain charm to it, a kind of real-world puzzle. Being lost wasn't always fun, but it was part of the adventure. It made finding your destination feel like a victory. Then came MapQuest in the early days of the internet. You could print out a full page of turn-by-turn directions before you left the house. It felt futuristic. But still, if you missed a step, you were stuck. The busy signal. There was a time, not all that long ago, when making a phone call came with a very specific sound, the busy signal. That loud, repetitive beep meant the person you were calling was already on the line. It was frustrating, sure, especially if you really needed to talk to them. But at least it told you something clear. They were home, they were using the phone, and you'd just have to try again later. In the days of landlines, this was part of everyday life. There was no call waiting at first, and no texting someone instead. You picked up the phone, dialed, and hoped it rang. If it didn't, that buzzing tone told you your call couldn't go through because the line was taken. Simple, predictable, honest. Today, it's a different story. When you call someone on a cell phone and get sent straight to voicemail, who knows what it means? Maybe their phone's off, maybe they hit decline, maybe they're out of battery, or maybe they just don't want to talk. The busy signal may have been annoying, but it was straightforward. And now, in a world of endless digital guessing games, that old beep almost feels comforting. Sick days and the price is right. If you grew up before streaming and endless on-demand options, you probably remember what a sick day at home really looked like. You'd stay in your pajamas, curled up on the couch with a blanket, maybe a bowl of soup nearby, and the TV on. But here's the thing. Your choices were slim. No Netflix, no YouTube, no binge-watching your favorite show. Daytime TV ruled, and if you were lucky, you'd catch The Price is Right with Bob Barker. That show became the highlight of so many childhood sick days. You'd watch people come on down to win kitchen appliances, cars, and cash prizes. Bob Barker was calm, kind, and smooth. Just the sort of voice you wanted to hear when you were feeling crummy. It was either that, or you had to sit through a soap opera with endless drama you didn't understand, or the local news talking about traffic and weather. Back then, your TV schedule was whatever the network served up. But somehow, it was enough. And now, looking back, those mornings with The Price is Right feel like a warm, nostalgic memory, part comfort, part routine, and totally unforgettable. What's one old-school gadget or habit you wish we still used today? Cursive writing. Cursive writing used to be a rite of passage. You learned it in elementary school, practiced it in notebooks with lined pages, and worked hard to make your loops and slants just right. It was considered elegant, proper, even necessary. Teachers graded you not only on what you wrote, but how you wrote it. And for decades, cursive was the standard for everything from love letters to formal documents. But today, most kids don't write in cursive. Many can't even read it. With the rise of email, texting, and digital communication, cursive has quietly slipped into the background. It's no longer taught in many schools, and outside of signing your name, there's not much reason to use it. Typed words are faster, cleaner, and easier to read. And let's face it, autocorrect doesn't work on a handwritten note. Some see the decline of cursive as the loss of an art form, a skill that once connected generations. Others see it as a natural step in a digital world. Either way, cursive writing now feels like a forgotten language. Once essential, now mostly symbolic. And every time we scribble our name at the bottom of a form, it's a tiny reminder of something we used to do every day. VCRs. When DVDs hit the US market in 1997, they didn't just bring better picture quality, they changed everything. It wasn't long before the good old VCR, once a staple in every living room, started to feel ancient. Compared to the sleek, shiny DVD, the VHS tape seemed bulky, fuzzy, and painfully slow. Rewinding was a chore, fast-forwarding wasn't accurate, and let's be honest, tapes wore out. Sometimes they'd even get chewed up in the machine, taking your Friday movie night with them. By 2005, even the Washington Post couldn't resist poking fun at the once mighty VCR, giving it a mock obituary. They joked it had died after a long illness caused by chronic technological insignificance and a lack of director's commentary tracks. And that really sums it up. DVDs came loaded with bonus features, menus, subtitles, you name it. Suddenly, VHS tapes looked like relics from a forgotten era. What's funny is, VCRs were revolutionary in their time. They gave families the power to record shows, rent movies, and watch them at home whenever they wanted. But like many once great inventions, they eventually faded away, leaving behind a trail of nostalgia and a few dusty boxes of old tapes in someone's attic. 1-hour photo counters. There's something almost ghostly about seeing an old photo processing counter at the back of a pharmacy today. It's like passing by an empty mall, quiet still, and filled with memories. Once upon a time, these spots were busy little hubs where people dropped off rolls of film, then came back an hour later, excited to see what they'd captured. Back then, 1 hour photo development felt like magic. You'd snap pictures without knowing if they turned out, hand over your film, and wait in anticipation. Would your vacation shots be perfect? Did your birthday pictures come out clear? That short wait built real excitement, and when the photos were ready, flipping through the glossy prints right there at the counter was its own little joy. Nobody imagined it would vanish so quickly. But with the rise of digital cameras and then smartphones, the whole process became instant. No more waiting, no more rolls of film, no more suspense. It's all right there in your pocket, ready to edit and share in seconds. Dot matrix printers. There was a time when the grinding, screeching sound of a dot matrix printer was just part of everyday life. These clunky machines were everywhere. Offices, schools, even home desks. They used rolls of perforated paper with those little holes on the sides, and they worked by striking an ink ribbon to make tiny dots on the page. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't quiet, and jams were frustratingly common, but it got the job done. Fast forward to today, and these relics have all but vanished. You might still spot one tucked away in a dusty corner of a thrift store's electronics aisle, or maybe humming quietly behind the desk at a car rental counter. They've been replaced by faster, quieter, and far more efficient printers. But hearing that old mechanical screech now, it hits differently. There's something oddly comforting about it, like the sound of a rotary phone or the whir of a cassette deck. It pulls you right back to a time when tech was more tactile, more hands-on. Slide projectors. There was a time when slide projectors were the ultimate way to share memories, lessons, or family vacations. These bulky machines were a fixture in classrooms and living rooms alike. Teachers would dim the lights, pull down the screen, and start clicking through slides while students quietly passed notes in the back row. At home, you might be stuck on a couch while your aunt proudly narrated every single photo from her trip to Niagara Falls, photo by photo, while you tried your best to look interested. The projector itself had a presence. You'd hear the gentle whir of the fan, feel the heat radiating off the lamp, and see tiny specks of dust floating in the beam of light. It created an atmosphere, a kind of ritual, that's hard to describe to anyone who never experienced it. Today, photos are shared instantly with a tap. They're edited, filtered, and forgotten in seconds. No more gathering in a dark room, no more clicking through carefully arranged slides, and no more politely nodding through a 200-picture slideshow. Slide projectors were clunky and slow, sure, but they brought people together in a way that few modern devices can match. They were part of a time when sharing meant being there in person. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment yes to let us know you're still following. Fax machines. There was a time when every office had one, and not just one, but often a dedicated line just for it. The fax machine was a cornerstone of business communication for decades. Contracts, memos, forms, they all zipped through phone lines with that familiar screeching handshake sound. It felt futuristic back then, like something out of a spy movie. You'd feed a piece of paper into one end, and like magic, it would print out on the other side, miles away. But today, most people under 30 have probably never even touched a fax machine. If you still have one sitting in the corner of your office, it's likely gathering dust. Even if you did give out your fax number, chances are no one would use it. Email, e-signatures, cloud storage. They've all made faxing feel like using a rotary phone in a world of smartphones. That said, a few industries still hang on: medical offices, law firms, and certain government departments. But even they are slowly moving on. The fax machine, once seen as cutting edge, is now a relic of a slower, more paper-heavy time. It had its moment, and it served us well. But its era has clearly come and gone. Polaroid cameras. Back in the day, if you wanted to see a photo right after taking it, there was only one way to do it. Use a Polaroid camera. These instant cameras were a big deal. You'd snap the photo, the machine would spit out the picture with a satisfying whir, and then came the best part, waiting. You'd gently shake it, even though that didn't actually help, and slowly, almost magically, the image would fade into view over the next few minutes. It wasn't exactly fast by today's standards, but it was lightning quick compared to traditional film. No driving to the drugstore, no waiting an hour or more, no surprise blurry shots a week later. With a Polaroid, you got a real, physical photo in your hands, right then and there. And that was enough to make it feel like the future. Fast forward to today, and kids can take dozens of high-res photos in seconds, scroll through them instantly, delete the bad ones, and add filters, all on a device they carry in their pocket. It's a different world now, full of instant gratification. But there's something nostalgic and almost magical about those old Polaroid moments, when waiting just a few minutes made it feel like a tiny miracle. Landline phones. There was a time when every home had a landline phone, sometimes more than one. They came in all shapes and colors, with cords that stretched across rooms and buttons you had to actually press. These phones were built for one purpose: talking. No apps, no touchscreens, no camera, and definitely no texting. If you wanted to reach someone, you called them, and if no one answered, you just tried again later. No voicemail, no read receipts. Back then, even the internet had to share the line. To get online, you had to plug your computer into the phone jack, listen to that screeching dial-up tone, and wait. And if someone in the house picked up another phone, boom, connection lost. It was slow, clunky, and yes, kind of frustrating. But there was something thrilling about hearing that dial-up sound kick in. It meant you were about to step into a whole new world. Now, we live in a time where phones are tiny supercomputers, always connected and always on. But there's a strange charm in remembering when phones stayed at home, cords got tangled, and just getting online felt like an adventure. It was messy, but it was ours. Cassette tapes and CD binders. For generations, music has always been the soundtrack of our lives. But before streaming apps and smartphones put millions of songs in our pockets, listening to music meant physically bringing it along for the ride. Whether you had a cassette tape case or one of those giant zip-up CD binders, your playlist was only as good as what you packed before you left the house. If you were going on a road trip, you'd flip through dozens of tapes or discs, deciding which albums or mixes would carry you through the drive. Once you were on the road, switching out a tape or CD while steering down the highway was no small task. It might not have been texting, but it was just as distracting and just as risky. Still, we all did it, fumbling to find the right track or rewind to our favorite song. That was part of the experience. Your music collection was something you touched, carried, and sometimes even showed off. Today, it's all digital, effortless, and instantly accessible. But back then, listening to music was a little more involved. And because of that, maybe even a little more special. It wasn't just background noise. It was something you chose, carried, and carefully queued up. Blind dates. There was a time, not that long ago, when going on a blind date meant really being in the dark. You'd get a call from a friend or a coworker saying, "Hey, I know someone you might like." And next thing you knew, you had plans with a total stranger. No pictures, no profiles, no way to scope them out beforehand. Just a name, a time, and maybe a vague description like, "They're really nice," or "You'll get along great." Sure, it was nerve-wracking, but that was part of the fun. You had no idea what to expect. Would there be chemistry? Would it be awkward? Would they even look like the person you pictured in your head? It was unpredictable, and in a weird way, kind of exciting. Fast forward to today, and blind dates are almost extinct. Apps like Tinder, Bumble, and Facebook have taken over the dating scene. You can scroll through photos, read bios, and even chat for days before meeting. It's efficient, convenient, and maybe a little safer. But that old school thrill? It's mostly gone. Do you still have any of these items, like floppy disks, CD binders, or a landline phone? Floppy disks. Before the word cloud meant digital storage, it was just a cloud. You know, the fluffy thing in the sky that brings rain. If you wanted to save a file back in the day, whether it was a school paper, a spreadsheet, or maybe a pixelated photo, you didn't upload it to the internet. You saved it to a floppy disk. These square plastic disks were once the gold standard of personal data storage. They held a whopping 1.44 megabytes, barely enough space for a single high-quality photo today. But back then, it was all you needed. People carried them around in cases, labeled them carefully, and prayed they wouldn't get corrupted. Inserting a floppy into your computer and hearing that click? That was the sound of progress. But today, floppy drives are completely gone from modern computers, and younger generations may have never even seen one in person. If you still have a few lying around, don't toss them. Seriously, they make great drink coasters now. Funny how something once so high-tech is now just a bit of nostalgic decor. The world may run on cloud storage now, but for anyone who grew up with floppies, they'll always be a tiny piece of tech history. The Dewey Decimal System. Imagine dropping today's tech-savvy kids into a library, no phones, no Google, no digital catalog, and telling them they have to find a book using the Dewey Decimal System. That, right there, might be the most intense reality show ever. Forget obstacle courses and balance beams. Try navigating rows of books organized by a numerical system you've never seen before, all while trying to remember what those numbers even mean. Back in the day, this was how we found information. You'd look up a subject in a giant card catalog. Yes, an actual box filled with little paper cards, and find a string of numbers that pointed to a book's exact location on a shelf. It was part detective work, part scavenger hunt. And while it built patience and research skills, it definitely wasn't fast. Paper cuts were common. So was walking in circles until you finally gave up and asked the librarian. Today, with search bars and AI, the idea of manually finding a book seems prehistoric. But for those of us who grew up with the Dewey Decimal System, it was a rite of passage and a reminder that knowledge used to take a little more effort and a little more blood. Beepers and pagers. There was a time when having a beeper or pager clipped to your belt meant you were important, or at least you wanted people to think you were. In the 80s and 90s, these little buzzers were all the rage. Doctors had them. Business people relied on them. Even teens begged for one just to look cool. When it went off, you'd check the number on the tiny screen, then hustle to the nearest payphone to call back. That was high-tech communication at the time. But flash forward to today, and the beeper is pretty much extinct. Not even old-school drug dealers want to use them anymore. That's how outdated they've become. With smartphones offering instant communication in every form imaginable, calls, texts, emails, DMs, the one-way beep of a pager just doesn't cut it. It's funny to think something so basic used to feel so futuristic. Today, beepers are just quirky relics of a time before everyone was constantly connected. They've been replaced, forgotten, and left in the dust by devices that do it all. Still, for those who remember that buzz, there's a weird kind of nostalgia tucked inside that little beep. Pocket calculators. Before smartphones took over, if you wanted to do math on the go, you needed a dedicated calculator. These little plastic devices were tiny computers in a sense, but with a single purpose: math. They couldn't send messages, browse the web, or take pictures. They just crunched numbers: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. That's all you got. And yet, they were everywhere, in backpacks, office desks, and kitchen drawers. Of course, kids found ways to have fun with them. Typing 8008 and flipping it upside down to make it look like boob was classic playground humor. Type in 7734, flip it, and there you had it. Hell. It didn't take much to entertain us back then, but today, hardly anyone carries around a physical calculator. Our phones have them built in, and not just basic ones. Scientific, graphing, and specialized apps have turned what used to be a single-use tool into a feature within a multi-use supercomputer. The humble calculator had its moment, but like so many once necessary gadgets, it's been absorbed into our phones. Still, for anyone who remembers math class before smartphones, those chunky buttons and tiny screens are a little piece of old-school tech history. Wild magazine ads. If you ever flipped through the back pages of a magazine or a Free City weekly in the 80s or 90s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those wild, often bizarre ads that promised everything from miracle hair growth to discount computer software to mail-order food you'd never dare eat. These pages were packed with tiny squares of bold fonts, grainy images, and big claims. Some were legit, some were questionable, and all of them were fascinating. You didn't scroll. You scanned. You circled ads you liked. Maybe you even tore out the page or mailed off for a catalog. It was low-tech advertising at its weirdest and most wonderful. These back-page ads were a gold mine of oddball culture and a glimpse into what people were selling and buying before the internet came along and swallowed it all. Today, those quirky ads have shifted into your phone. They're targeted, tracked, and tailored to your browsing habits. But they've lost that strange human charm, the randomness, the surprises. And while digital ads are smarter, it's hard not to miss the chaos of flipping through those cluttered pages just to see what odd treasure you'd stumble across. The death of print news. There was a time when getting the news meant walking outside, grabbing the newspaper off your porch, and sitting down with a cup of coffee, or maybe heading to the store to buy the latest issue of your favorite magazine. It wasn't fast, and it definitely wasn't instant. The newspaper was usually a recap of yesterday's news, and magazines. They covered stories from last week, maybe even last month. But we didn't mind. That was just how the world worked. Now, the information highway is always on and always fast. News breaks in real time. A celebrity sneezes, and the internet knows about it before they've even reached for a tissue. We scroll through updates, check headlines on search engines, and get push notifications the moment something happens. That demand for instant delivery has changed everything, and it's been tough on newspapers and magazines. Many have folded, others have gone digital only, and the ones still hanging on, you'll see them at the checkout counter, but rarely in someone's hands. We've traded patience for speed, and while the convenience is amazing, there's something quietly nostalgic about those slower mornings, flipping through pages, underlining articles, and getting your news one day at a time. T20 things kids did in the 1970s that are gone today. The 70s. A little wild, a bit risky, and totally unforgettable. Kids built clubhouses from scrap, rode bikes without helmets, and walked to school alone. No seatbelts, no screens, no problem. Curious how we survived it all? Stick around as we revisit the fun, fearless, and now unthinkable things kids did in the 1970s. Saturday mornings and neighborhood adventures. Weekends in the 1970s had their own rhythm, and it all started with Saturday morning cartoons, That was your time. You'd pour yourself a bowl of the sweetest cereal you could find, something like Cap'n Crunch or Fruit Loops, and plop down in front of the TV for hours of animated bliss. Bugs Bunny, Scooby-Doo, the Jetsons. It didn't get better than that. But by mid-morning, your screen time was up. The TV got handed over to Dad for sports, a movie, or the nightly news. That was your cue to get moving. With cartoons done, you headed outside. The best part? You didn't need a plan. You'd just bike over to your friend's house, ring the doorbell, and ask, "Can you come out and play?" No texting, no scheduling, just pure spontaneity. And you always knew where the fun was by spotting the pile of bikes in someone's front yard. That was the signal. This was the house where something was happening. As long as you stayed out of your parents' way, you were free to roam. It was a simple, unspoken deal. The weekend was for fun, just not the kind that involved bugging Mom and Dad. Schools in the 1970s. In the 1970s, school wasn't just about the classroom. The real lessons were often learned out on the playground. It was a rough and tumble place where kids settled arguments on their own. There were no tattling apps, no security cameras, and no hovering adults. What happened out there usually stayed out there, unofficial, unreported, and unforgettable. Scrapes and bruises were part of daily life. And when you got hurt, a teacher didn't call your parents or file paperwork. They just dabbed on some bright red mercurochrome and sent you back out. Parent-teacher conferences? Oh, those were terrifying. For kids, not the teachers. Most parents didn't even know their child's teacher's name, let alone their qualifications. But when that conference rolled around, you held your breath, hoping your secrets wouldn't come out. And if you brought home a bad grade, don't expect hugs and sympathy. You got a firm talk, maybe even grounded. On the other hand, if you earned an award, like Student of the Week, it really meant something. It wasn't a participation prize. It meant you worked hard, behaved well, and earned it. School back then was gritty, simple, and a bit chaotic, but it shaped tough, independent kids who didn't expect gold stars just for showing up. The Soap Slick Trampoline Challenge. In the 1970s, having a trampoline in your backyard wasn't just cool. It made your house the neighborhood hotspot. But let's be clear, these weren't the modern trampolines you see today, with padded edges, safety nets, and strict warning labels. No way. Ours were stripped down, spring-loaded launch pads, just a metal frame, a stretched mat, and pure adrenaline. And as kids, we weren't just bouncing around. We were turning it into our own stunt arena. One of our craziest inventions? The soap and water trick. We'd grab the garden hose, soak the surface, then add a generous squeeze of Palmolive dish soap. Instantly, our trampoline transformed into a dangerously slippery ride. We'd take turns running, flipping, and sliding across it like daredevils in a homemade circus act. And sure, someone always ended up flying off and landing with a thud in the grass, or sometimes the driveway. But that didn't stop us. In fact, it only made it funnier. We didn't worry about safety nets or soft landings. The thrill came from knowing it could go totally wrong, and doing it anyway. Those wild soap slick summers were unforgettable. It wasn't just a trampoline. It was a launch pad for fearless fun and belly laugh memories. We want to hear your wildest, funniest, or most "how did we survive that" childhood moment. No helmets, no problem. Back in the 1970s, childhood was all about freedom. Real, unsupervised freedom. We'd wake up, hop on our bikes, and disappear for the entire day. No helmets, no knee pads, no reflective gear. Just us, our bikes, and the great unknown. There weren't bike lanes or carefully marked trails either. We pedaled through neighborhoods, cut through empty lots, and raced down steep hills without a second thought. Crashing was just part of the fun. We scraped our knees, bruised our elbows, and sometimes limped home covered in dust and dried blood. But we didn't see those as injuries. We saw them as trophies. Each scab came with a wild story, a daring jump, a wicked turn, or a race we almost won. And the best part? Nobody panicked. Parents didn't get blamed for letting us roam. If anything, they encouraged it. We learned how to take risks, fall hard, and get back up without tears. It taught us grit. Today's kids have safety gear for everything. But back then, adventure was our armor. And honestly, it made growing up feel like a real journey, full of scars we were proud to show off. Mom's spit and a handkerchief. Back in the 1970s, kids practically lived outdoors. From the moment the sun came up to when the streetlights flickered on, we were out riding bikes, climbing trees, and getting into all kinds of dusty adventures. We didn't worry about germs or dirt. Honestly, half the time, we didn't even notice it. But when we did need a quick cleanup, say before going into church, visiting grandma, or taking a school photo, there was one universal solution every mom seemed to carry. She'd reach into her purse, pull out a wrinkled old handkerchief, and give it a good spit. That's right, just a little mom spit and a few swipes across your face, and bam, you were good as new. Didn't matter if you had dried ketchup, playground grime, or even mystery goo on your cheek. That magic combo of mom's spit and cloth could tackle anything. No wipes, no sanitizers, no fancy soaps. Just old school parenting at its finest. Looking back, it might sound gross to today's kids, but to us, it was just part of life. And honestly, it worked like a charm, because nothing cleaned better than a determined mom with a spit-polished hanky. Camp without the paperwork. Going to summer camp in the 1970s, now that was a whole different experience. You didn't need a giant stack of forms, multiple signatures, or a folder full of medical records. Nope. Your parents signed you up with a quick phone call or a one-page flyer from school, and that was that. There were no long questionnaires asking about food allergies, emergency contacts, or insurance policies. No waivers, no legal fine print. Just a sleeping bag, a canteen, and a peanut butter sandwich for the bus ride. And believe it or not, we all survived. Sure, kids got poison ivy, scraped knees, or the occasional bee sting, but no one freaked out. If you got hurt, the camp nurse patched you up with a Band-Aid and maybe some calamine lotion, and you were back roasting marshmallows an hour later. Our parents trusted the camp, and us. There was this unspoken understanding that a few bumps and bruises were part of the experience. Camp wasn't about bubble wrapping kids. It was about adventure, independence, and coming home with wild stories and maybe a frog in your backpack. Simpler times? Absolutely. And somehow, all the better for it. School lunches, mean teachers, and no frills. School in the 1970s wasn't about high rankings or prestige. You just went to the closest one in your neighborhood. No big decisions, no long application processes. Just grab your backpack and go. If you rode the school bus and acted up, the driver didn't hesitate to bark at you. And guess what? The kid got in trouble, not the adult. Discipline was direct and immediate. You knew the rules, and if you broke them, you paid the price. Lunch was no gourmet affair either. We carried our food in metal lunchboxes, often decorated with our favorite TV shows or superheroes. Inside, leftovers, bologna, or tuna sandwiches, without refrigeration. There were no cold packs, no classroom fridges, and definitely no one asking about food safety. And still, nobody seemed to get sick. If you had a cranky teacher, well, you just dealt with it. You didn't get switched out of class. You learned to adapt. And if you messed up, you might get a swat or two. Telling your parents? Not a chance. They'd likely back the teacher up. It was a tough love approach, but it taught you boundaries real fast. Wild birthday parties of the 70s. Birthday parties in the 1970s were a whole different kind of fun. There were no custom party themes, organic veggie trays, or balloon artists making unicorns. Nope, we kept it simple and exciting. The food was classic and kid-approved. Hot dogs, burgers grilled out back, a big bottle of soda, and a sugary cake piled high with frosting. That was all we needed to have a blast. But what really made parties special were the games. And let's be honest, most of them would never fly today. Take the donut on a string challenge. You'd have your hands tied behind your back, sometimes blindfolded, and try to eat a swinging donut while others cheered or laughed at your wild attempts. Some kids even took it up a notch by hanging upside down while trying to win. It was chaotic, messy, and hilarious. Then there was the classic pin the tail on the donkey. But this wasn't a sticker version. We used real tacks. After being spun around until we were dizzy, we'd stumble toward a paper donkey and jab that tack in, hopefully not into someone's arm. Nobody complained, and nobody got sued. It was just good, slightly dangerous, birthday fun. Field trips and school breaks, 1970s style. Back in the 70s, school field trips were refreshingly simple. There weren't stacks of permission slips or safety checklists. Nobody talked about a chaperone-to-student ratio. A couple of teachers and maybe one or two brave parents came along, and that was enough. The big deal wasn't where you were going. It was that you were getting out of class for the day. That alone made it special. And because we didn't want to mess it up for ourselves or anyone else, we behaved, at least most of the time. When it came to school breaks, they felt like real freedom. No scheduled enrichment camps or themed art weeks, just long, open days filled with whatever we wanted to do. Most of us gravitated toward outdoor fun, bike rides, makeshift games, or maybe a little pickup baseball in the park. We burned off steam the old-fashioned way, by moving our bodies and using our imaginations. Summers weren't about structured productivity. They were about breathing room, a chance to be a kid without a schedule. It was simple, sure, but that simplicity gave us space to grow, explore, and recharge without pressure. Sleepovers, chores, and family time. Weekends in the 70s weren't just about fun. They were about balance. Sure, there was plenty of playtime, but there were also routines that kept the family running. Sleepovers were a weekend highlight. You'd stay at a friend's house one Saturday, then host them at yours the next. There were no apps, no sleepover bags with checklists, just a quick phone call, a nod from the parents, and you were good to go. But even with all the fun, there were responsibilities. Dinner wasn't a grab-and-go affair. It was a sit-down meal with the whole family at the table. That was when you talked about your day, what was going on in the world, and maybe even listened to Dad's opinions about politics or baseball. It was part of being connected and expected. Once dinner was over, it wasn't time to relax. It was time to help. You took out the trash, did the dishes, maybe wiped the counters. Homework mattered, but so did pitching in. And being tired, that didn't get you out of chores or earn you sympathy. Everyone was tired, but manners still mattered. That's just how it was. Weekends blended fun, freedom, and family in a way that taught us responsibility without even realizing it. Grocery store adventures without iPads. Going to the grocery store in the 1970s was more than a chore. It was an adventure. Kids didn't sit strapped into padded, germ-proof carts. We rode in the metal basket with boxes and bags tossed right on top of us. It was like being part of the groceries, and riding on the back of the cart while your parent pushed? That was the real thrill ride. Sure, sometimes it tipped over, But that was half the fun. The cereal aisle was magical. Bright boxes, sugary options, and best of all, hidden prizes inside. You didn't care about nutrition labels. You just wanted the toy. And milk. There was one kind, whole milk. If you didn't like it, you added ice or drank half a glass. None of this oat, soy, or almond stuff. It was milk, or no milk. Every store had a local butcher who actually knew your family. Meat packages didn't always have sell-by dates. You just checked the color and gave it a sniff. Simpler times. No one stared at a screen. No TikTok dances in the aisle. You explored, helped bag groceries, and maybe even scored a cookie at the bakery. It was a family outing that didn't need entertainment. It was the entertainment. Long car rides and the arm of doom. Long car trips in the 70s weren't filled with snacks, movies, or iPads. You got in the car, buckled your lap belt, if you had one, and made do. No juice boxes or curated playlists. If you were thirsty, you waited. If you were hungry, you waited. And if you said you were bored, oh boy, that was a rookie mistake. That guaranteed you'd be handed a broom or sent outside to rake leaves when you got home. So, kids learned to get creative. We played car bingo, looked for out-of-state license plates, and came up with endless silly games. Sometimes you'd yank the elastic out of your sock and pop your sibling with it. Of course, that usually led to a scream and the dreaded moment. Dad's arm swinging back from the front seat. He never even looked, just reached back like a ninja. And if things got too rowdy, he'd threaten to stop the car right then and there. You knew he meant it too. But even with all that, road trips were fun. We told stories, made up songs, and laughed until someone fell asleep against the window. It wasn't fancy, but we made memories that stuck, all without screens, snacks, or complaints. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, don't hesitate to hit the like button below. If there's anything we can improve, take a moment to leave a comment. We're always looking to get better. Thanks so much. Sports meant something back then. Playing sports as a kid in the 1970s was a big deal. Making a team, whether it was for baseball, football, or the local Saturday soccer league, wasn't guaranteed. You had to try out. And if you didn't make the cut, well, you had to work harder or find something else. That was just how it went. But when you did make it, it felt like a real achievement. Every practice, every game, it all meant something. And winning? That was the dream. You could brag about the final score, relive your big moment, or even exaggerate a bit for storytelling's sake. If your team had a great season and took home the trophy, you earned that piece of hardware. Sure, there were trophies for second and third place, but that was it. You didn't get one just for showing up. Participation alone wasn't the goal. Doing your best was. Family always came first, too. If there was a vacation planned, sports took a back seat. Parents didn't rearrange their lives for game day. That balance between fun, effort, and family made sports feel real. Not an obligation, but a privilege. And that's something that feels a bit lost in today's world of overscheduling. Pocket knives and lawn darts. If you were a 10-year-old boy in the 1970s, there was one gift that meant you were officially growing up: a pocket knife. Getting one for your birthday wasn't just normal, it was expected. It came with a quiet nod from your dad or grandpa, like, "You're ready." And you didn't need a survival kit to justify it. That little blade came in handy for everything, from whittling sticks to cutting fishing line, and if you took care of it, it could last a lifetime. But the fun and the danger didn't stop there. At birthday parties, we played with toys that would probably be banned today. Take lawn darts, for example. These weren't the soft, kid-friendly ones you see now. These were heavy, metal-tipped missiles we'd toss high into the air, aiming for plastic rings on the grass. And yes, sometimes they came down a little too close for comfort. but no one seemed too worried. We ducked, dodged, and kept playing. The 70s had a different approach to childhood. We were trusted to handle things. There was danger, sure, but there was also a sense of responsibility. And that mix made growing up feel a little more real and a lot more memorable. What's a memory from your childhood that you wish kids today could experience? Sharing germs and blood brothers. Back in the 1970s, birthday parties weren't just fun. They were wild, carefree, and totally unsupervised by today's standards. And when it came to germs, nobody gave them a second thought. We didn't label cups with names or carry around hand sanitizer. Every kid grabbed a paper cup from the stack, and if someone else accidentally took a sip from yours, oh well. You either shrugged it off or just grabbed another. And food? We passed it around like it was part of the party, offering a bite of your hot dog or a lick of your ice cream cone to a friend. Totally normal. And if someone got a cut during a game or roughhousing in the backyard, that wasn't the end of the fun. Sometimes it turned into something bigger, a ceremony of sorts. You'd press your scraped finger against your buddies, declare yourselves blood brothers, and that sealed the deal. It was a childhood oath, made before the world got complicated. This was all long before the health scares of the 80s, before people really thought about bloodborne diseases. Back then, germs weren't enemies. They were just part of growing up. And friendship? That was worth sharing everything, even a drop of blood. Playing outside until the streetlights came on. In the 1970s, go play outside wasn't just a suggestion. It was a way of life. Parents didn't plan playdates or check calendars. They simply opened the door and let you loose. You'd head out after breakfast with nothing but your bike, your imagination, and maybe a few neighborhood friends. No phones, no supervision, just freedom. The entire neighborhood was your playground. Front yards, empty lots, and sidewalks became battlegrounds for epic games of tag, kickball, or hide and seek. If you got bored, you made up a new game right on the spot. Rules were flexible, arguments were settled quickly, and the only time you looked at the sky was to see if it was getting dark. There was one rule every kid knew. When the streetlights came on, it was time to head home. That soft glow in the evening sky was nature's curfew bell. You'd race your bike home, sweaty, scraped up, and smiling from ear to ear. No one tracked your steps or worried about screen time. You just lived in the moment. Those long, unscheduled days outside taught us independence, creativity, and how to make our own fun. And honestly, we wouldn't trade them for anything. Making mixtapes from the radio. Long before streaming, playlists, or digital downloads, there was the sacred art of making a mixtape. In the 1970s and early 80s, all you needed was a blank cassette, a boombox, and a whole lot of patience. You'd sit next to the radio for what felt like hours, fingers poised on the record button, just waiting for your favorite song to come on. When it finally did, you had to act fast. Press record at the perfect moment to avoid the DJ's intro, and pray they didn't talk over the ending. If they did, you rewound the tape, cursed under your breath, and started over. No editing, no cutting out ads. What you recorded was what you got. But that raw, imperfect mix had heart. A good mixtape was more than just music. It was a message, sometimes to a crush, sometimes just for yourself. You'd carefully write out the track list by hand, maybe even decorate the case. It was personal, meaningful, and completely yours. It wasn't easy, but that's what made it special. You earned every track. And when you finally had that perfect mix, you listened to it until the tape wore thin, and then you made another. Building clubhouses from scratch. Back in the 1970s, if a kid wanted a clubhouse, They didn't wait for someone to order it online or assemble it from a big box store kit. We made our own, with whatever scraps we could find. Old wooden boards, rusty nails, leftover shingles, and even broken doors pulled from someone's trash pile. Nothing matched, and it was far from safe by today's standards. But to us, it was perfect. We'd spend days hauling junk down the alley or from the garage, nailing it all together with whatever tools we could borrow from Dad's shed. Sometimes it leaned a little, sometimes the roof leaked, but it was ours. It was a hideout, a base for imaginary missions, a place where no grown-ups were allowed unless invited. We painted signs like "No girls allowed," or made up secret passwords to get in. These weren't just clubhouses, they were kingdoms, and building them taught us something. We learned how to use tools, how to work together, how to problem solve. Most of all, we learned how to create fun from nothing. No instructions, no adult supervision, just a bunch of kids with big imaginations and a pile of scrap wood. The magic of the Christmas catalog. Before online shopping, before scrolling and tapping, there was the catalog. When the holiday season rolled around, every kid waited for that thick Christmas catalog to arrive in the mailbox. Sears, J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward. It didn't matter where it came from. What mattered was that it was packed with pages of dreams. Toys, games, bikes, dolls. It was all there in glorious, full-color print. We'd grab a pen or marker and start circling everything we wanted. Some kids even folded pages or added stars next to their top picks. You'd lie on the floor, flipping through it over and over, planning and hoping. But here's the thing. We didn't expect to get it all, not even close. If you were lucky, you got one thing from your wish list. And that one gift? It felt like magic. There was something special about hoping for that one perfect item. No endless online carts, no next-day delivery, just anticipation. The wait made it sweeter. And even if we didn't get what we wanted, we were still happy with what we had. That catalog wasn't just a shopping guide. It was a book of dreams, imagination, and the joy of wishing. Something today's instant gratification world could use a little more of. Walking to school alone. In the 1970s, walking to school was just part of everyday life. No drop-off lines, no minivans, and definitely no school traffic patrols. Most kids made their way to school on foot or by bike, rain or shine. Even the littlest ones, kindergartners, often walked with older siblings or neighborhood friends. It wasn't seen as risky. It was just what kids did. There was something empowering about it. You learned the road early on, and you were expected to stick to it. You looked both ways, stayed on the sidewalk, and figured out how to avoid the one house with the grumpy dog. We weren't tracked by GPS or followed by nervous parents. We had to pay attention and stay sharp. It taught us more than just how to get from point A to point B. It gave us a sense of responsibility and trust. Being on time was up to you. If you were late, it wasn't your mom's fault. It was yours. And that mattered. There was freedom in that little walk each morning. It was a chance to talk with friends, enjoy the crisp air, or just daydream before the bell rang. Looking back, it was a small thing, but it shaped us in big ways. Whether we noticed or not, so many everyday things have quietly disappeared. It's amazing how fast the world changes. Did we miss something you remember fondly? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. And, as always, thank you so much for watching and taking this walk down memory lane with us.